This all started with a smile that felt wrong. The kettle had just started to whistle, steam fogging up the little window above my sink. It was a gray afternoon, the kind that made the whole house feel smaller and quieter. I was reaching for my favorite mug when my daughter-in-law Jenna turned toward me. She was standing in my kitchen, framed by the doorway, holding a stack of my mail in her manicured hands, and she was smiling. "Why, sweet, too sweet. Don't worry about a thing, Mom," she said, her voice dipped in honey. "I'll take care of everything for you. You just rest. I'm 68 years old. I've lived through a broken economy, a broken marriage, and one too many broken appliances. I know what sincerity sounds like, and whatever was in her voice that day, it wasn't that. My name is Margaret Hayes, and I never imagined that one strange smile in my own kitchen would lead me to discover just how far my own family was willing to go to push me out of my own life." The coffee machine hummed behind me. Somewhere down the street, a dog started barking. Ordinary sounds, but in that moment they seemed too loud, like the world was trying to distract me from the way my chest had suddenly tightened. I forced a little laugh. "Oh, you don't have to fuss over me, Jenna. I'm not going anywhere." Her eyes flicked over my face, quick and calculating, before the soft expression snapped right back into place. "I know," she said, moving closer, laying the mail on the counter with an organized little tap. "I just want you to relax more. You've done enough, you know? You shouldn't worry your head about bills and paperwork and all that stuff. Mark and I can handle it. My son, my only child. Mark's busy with work," I said gently. "He doesn't need to be worrying about my gas bill on top of everything else." She smiled again, that same tight, glossy look. "He wants to. We both do." The smell of coffee filled the kitchen. Toast popped up in the toaster. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked as the house settled. Again, also normal. And yet a little shiver ran down my spine. She turned away, walking toward the hallway with that mail still in hand, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood. I watched her for a moment, my fingers curved around the handle of my mug. That's when I heard it. A whisper, faint, cut off quickly. "She won't be a problem much longer, just." Then silence. I frowned, leaning slightly, trying to hear more. The hallway swallowed her words like it had agreed to keep her secrets. "Did you say something?" called, trying to sound casual. There was a beat. Then, "No, Mom. Just talking to myself." The old clock on the wall ticked steadily between us, marking off seconds that suddenly felt like they weighed something. It's funny how the mind works. One odd smile, one half-heard sentence, and suddenly old memories stir. Tiny things you ignored before start lining up like little warning flags. And one particular memory came back to me then. Not of Jenna, not of Mark, but of my late husband, John. "Just in case," he'd said, up on the ladder in that same hallway 12 years ago. "You never know. Better to be safe than sorry, Max." He had installed a tiny camera in the corner of the hallway ceiling, hidden near the smoke detector. Back then, we were worried about break-ins. I never needed it. I never even really remembered it was there. Until that exact moment, standing in my kitchen with cooling toast and a too-sweet smile echoing in my ears. That night, after Jenna left and the house slipped into its usual quiet, I stood in that hallway, neck craned back, staring up at the tiny black dot in the ceiling. My heart thudded in my chest, loud and uneven. I could have gone to bed. I could have told myself I was being paranoid, that I was tired, that getting older meant getting suspicious, that I should just be grateful my daughter-in-law wanted to help. I didn't. Instead, I went to the little cabinet where John had kept all his old tech gadgets. The wood smelled faintly of dust and motor oil, just like him. I found the small receiver, the cords we'd never used, the instructions still folded inside a yellowing plastic sleeve. My hands were shaking as I plugged everything in next to the old TV in my bedroom. The heater clicked on with a soft whoosh. Outside, the wind snapped against the window like impatient fingers. When the screen flickered to life, I saw my own hallway. Empty, quiet, the runner rug, the old framed family photo on the wall, the closed door to the guest room where Jenna and Mark sometimes stayed. It looked harmless. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. "You're being silly," I whispered to myself, but I left the receiver on. Hours later, when the house had settled deeper into silence and the night felt thick enough to swim in, I came back to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and rewound the recording. I told myself I was just checking, just being thorough like John would have been. I pressed play. What I saw on that screen sent a cold, thin line of fear straight through me. And it wasn't just about what my daughter-in-law had done that day. It was about everything I had missed leading up to that moment. If you had met me 20 years ago, you never would have imagined me sitting in a dark bedroom, watching security footage like some anxious detective. You would have found me in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, flour on my hands. You would have heard music playing low on the radio, maybe Sinatra or something from the 70s. You'd have seen my husband, John, leaning against the doorframe with that lopsided smile of his, teasing me about putting too much butter in the mashed potatoes. Back then, my world smelled like roast chicken and lemon cleaner. It sounded like my son's laughter, the garage door opening, football games on TV. My life had a rhythm, a comfort. We bought this house in Denver when Mark was 6, a little one-story with healing paint and a crooked front step. We fixed it up together. On summer evenings, the three of us would sit on the porch with popsicles, watching the sun drop behind the mountains. The porch light would click on automatically, casting a warm yellow circle on the concrete. John used to say, "This place will always be home, no matter what happens." For the longest time, he was right. I remember the first time I met Jenna. She came over for dinner when she and Mark had just started dating. She stood in my doorway, clutching a bouquet of grocery store flowers, cheeks flushed from the cold. "Hi, Mrs. Hayes," she'd murmured. "I'm so nervous." She had laughed at herself then, and it was real, pure. She nearly dropped the flowers when our old tabby cat rubbed against her leg. I liked her immediately. That night, I made lasagna and garlic bread. The house was filled with the smell of tomatoes and cheese, candle wax and fresh bread. The four of us sat at the dining table, talking about everything and nothing. Back then, Jenna's eyes sparkled when she looked at my son. She helped me clear the plates without being asked. She asked for my recipe. She called me Mom for the first time at their wedding rehearsal. I cried so hard my mascara left little gray streaks on my cheeks. She wiped them away with her thumbs and said, "You're stuck with me now." I didn't realize then how true that would feel, in ways I never expected. Years passed. Life did what it always does. John's back got worse. His breathing got harder. There were hospital visits, cold waiting rooms, styrofoam cups of coffee that tasted like cardboard. One morning, in a room that smelled like antiseptic and something heavy and final, he slipped away while I was holding his hand. After that, the house changed. Same photos on the wall, same furniture, same old porch light, but without his laugh, his footsteps, his humming in the bathroom while he shaved. It felt like someone turned the volume down on my life. Mark and Jenna tried to help. They came by more often at first. Jenna would bring over casseroles. Mark would fix whatever was broken. We'd sit at the same dining table and try to talk around the empty space where John should have been. But grief has a way of rearranging the pieces of a family. Slowly, quietly, so gently that you don't notice until whole rooms inside you have shifted. Mark got promoted at work. Jenna picked up more hours. They had their first baby, then their second. My grandbabies became the new center of their world, as they should. My visits turned into scheduled weekends, then into holidays, then into "we'll see how things go this month, Mom." I still baked. I still decorated for Christmas. I kept a jar of candy on the shelf for little hands. I made sure the guest room always had fresh sheets and clean towels. But the phone started ringing less. And when it did, more and more of the time, it was Jenna's voice I heard on the other end instead of my son's. "Hey Mom, it's Jenna. We're just slammed this week." Mark says hi. First, I didn't mind. I told myself this was life. Kids grow up. Families change. I didn't want to be the needy mother who guilted them into visiting. Still, there were tiny moments. The time I found out they had taken the kids to the zoo because I saw it on Jenna's social media, not because anyone invited me. The afternoon I overheard Jenna telling one of her friends, "Yeah, we have to stop by Mark's mom's this Sunday. She gets lonely, you know how it is." The hushed conversation in my hallway one day when they thought I was napping, "We need to talk to her about the house at some point. We can't keep driving all the way over here. It's not practical." That last one had stung, not because of what she said exactly, but because my son hadn't disagreed. I stood in the kitchen that day, hands still wet from washing dishes, and stared at the tiny droplet of water sliding down the knife. I told myself I had misheard, that they were thinking about my well-being. I've always been very good at giving people the benefit of the doubt. Too good. So when Jenna started helping with my mail, I didn't argue. She'd pick up the envelopes from the hallway table, frowning at due dates and official logos. "These things can be confusing, Mom," she said. "Just let me handle it. I'll make sure everything gets paid on time." When she suggested I give her access to my online banking so she could keep an eye on things, I hesitated. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. She laughed softly. "You trust me, don't you?" Of course I did. Or at least I thought I should. But trust and truth aren't always the same thing. That's how we ended up back in that gray afternoon, with a humming fridge and the too sweet smile. And that's how I ended up sitting alone in my bedroom, staring at the grainy hallway footage, my heart pounding in my ears. On the screen past me moved through the frame, carrying the laundry basket down the hall. Jenna walked behind me, eyes flicking up toward the camera she didn't realize was live. She waited until I went into the bedroom and closed the door. Then she walked back to the hallway table, rifled through the mail, and slipped one envelope into her purse. I leaned closer to the TV. She pulled out her phone, pressed a button, and lifted it to her ear. "She's fine," Jenna said quietly, glancing toward my bedroom door. "But we need to move faster. She still hasn't signed that form. I'll try again next week." "Yeah, I know. She trusts me." My breath caught in my throat. She listened for a moment, then smiled, that same syrupy expression I'd seen hours earlier in the kitchen. "She'll be out of the house soon," she said. "Just keep your voice down, okay?" The world seemed to narrow to the rectangle of light in front of me. The heater clicked on again. The wind rattled the window. My fingers dug into the bedspread. Out of the house. Soon. I watched watched my daughter-in-law tuck my mail into her purse, smooth her hair, and stroll down the hall like she belonged in every inch of my life. I skipped ahead. Another clip, a different day. Me in the living room, dozing in my chair while an old movie played. Jenna in the kitchen, my purse open on the counter, her fingers moving quickly, a little too practiced. A credit card slipping into her hand, then back again. I must have missed that, I whispered, my voice cracking. I watched clip after clip, her whispering on the phone, her rolling her eyes when I turned away, her talking to someone I couldn't see in the open door, saying she has more money than she knows what to do with. It's not like she'll miss any of it. With every passing minute, something inside me crumbled, and something else hardened. The worst one came near the end of the recording. I saw Jenna standing in the hallway with a stack of papers in her hands. My son Mark stood beside her, hair messy, jaw tense. Just ask her again, Jenna hissed. Tell her the lawyer needs it. She likes you better. She'll sign it if you ask. Mark rubbed his face. I don't feel right about this. You don't feel right, she snapped. We're drowning, Mark. We're doing this for our family. She's alone in that big old house, and she can barely go up the stairs. This would be better for her too. My son looked up, his eyes flicking toward my bedroom door, where on that day I had been lying down with a headache. She trusts you, Jenna said again, softening her voice. She always has. He let out a long breath. Fine, I'll try again. But this is the last time, Jenna. I mean it. The clip ended with him knocking gently on my bedroom door. Mom, you awake? I hit pause. The room was so quiet that the ticking of my bedside clock sounded like hammer strikes. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the frozen image of my son's hand on my door. My boy, the one I had nursed through fevers and heartbreaks, the one I had stayed up late for, waiting to hear the key in the door when he was a teenager, the one whose head had once fit perfectly beneath my chin when he cried. He had been standing in my hallway, debating how to convince me to sign something I didn't understand. Not for me, for them. A wave of dizziness washed over me. I pressed my fingers to my temples, breathing through the sting behind my eyes. I felt stupid, old, naive, but I also felt something else. Underneath the hurt, underneath the fear, underneath the crushing sense of betrayal, there was a small, stubborn ember of clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a one-off bad decision or a moment of stress. This was the plan. And if they were planning, then I needed to start planning too. I got up from the bed on unsteady legs and walked slowly down the stairs, one hand grazing the banister. The house creaked around me like it was listening. In the kitchen, the faint smell of coffee still lingered from earlier. The mug I'd used sat in the sink, ringed with a thin brown circle. Everything looked the same, but nothing was. I stood in the middle of my own kitchen and realized that if I didn't do something, I might really lose everything. My money, my home, my dignity. I pressed my palms against the cool countertop, feeling its solidness under my hands. I won't let them, I murmured. I won't let them do this to me. My voice sounded small in the empty room, but it was there, firm, certain. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay awake listening to the fridge hum, the heater start and stop, the wind scraping tree branches against the siding. Memories drifted in and out. The first time I held Mark, the way John's laugh used to fill the living room, Jenna bringing over those grocery store flowers. It all blurred with the images I just watched, the sneaking, the whispers, the lies. Sometime around 3 in the morning, as the digital clock glowed dull red on my nightstand, I swung my legs over the side of the bed. If they were targeting me, really targeting me, I needed to know how deep it went. I needed to see everything, and I couldn't do that half asleep, heartsick and scared. I needed to become the one person they clearly thought I couldn't be anymore. Careful, prepared, dangerous. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. The sky outside was a pale, colorless gray. The grass in the yard sparkled faintly with frost. I made myself a strong cup of coffee, the bitter smell cutting through the fog in my brain. Then I sat down at the little desk in the corner of the living room, the one I used to pay bills on with John. I opened my laptop. The familiar login screen stared back at me. My fingers hesitated for a moment over the keys. Then I began. First, I checked my bank accounts, every one of them. I dug into the statements, scrolling back months, years. I had always trusted that the numbers were what they were supposed to be. Now I examined each line like it was written in a foreign language and I was trying to learn it from scratch. That's when I saw them. Withdrawals I didn't remember making. Small at first. $50 here, $60 there. Then a couple of bigger ones. $300, $500. All online transfers. My stomach tightened. My name was on the account. My password would have been the key. And Jenna had my password. Just in case, she'd said. In case anything happens to you, Mom. It's safer. I should have said no. I didn't. Next I opened my email. I searched for messages from my doctor's office, my insurance, my lawyer. I found a notification for an appointment that had supposedly been canceled at patient's request. I stared at the screen. I had never canceled that appointment. A similar phrase appeared in another email. Per your daughter-in-law's call. I felt my chest constrict. I made a list. Every strange charge. Every canceled appointment. Every time Jenna Jenna's name appeared where mine should have been. By the time the sun fully rose, turning the living room windows into muted mirrors, my list was 2 pages long. I picked up the phone and called my old attorney, the one John and I had used for our wills before he passed. The office smelled like coffee and toner the last time I'd been there. I could still picture the framed landscape paintings on the walls and the potted plant that was always half dying, half reviving. "Good morning, this is Angela's office," a crisp voice answered. "Hi, this is Margaret Hayes," I said. I heard the faint tremor in my own voice and forced it steady. I was wondering if I could speak to her. "It's important." They put me on hold. Soft piano music trickled through the line, tinny and distant. My fingers twisted around the phone cord. "Margaret," a familiar voice came on. "It's been a while. How are you?" I swallowed. "I think someone's been trying to get information about my will," I said quietly. "Someone who shouldn't." There was a pause. "Come in," she said. "Today if you can. We'll talk." The air outside bit at my face as I stepped onto the porch, wrapping my coat tighter. The street was quiet. Cars parked along the curb, frost clinging to their windshields. My breath puffed out in little white clouds. As I drove across town, the heater in the car rattled, blowing warm air onto my cold hands. The city moved around me, people walking dogs, kids with backpacks, a jogger with headphones, life continuing as usual. No idea a woman in a silver sedan was trying to figure out if her own child was planning to take her home and her money. Angela's office was just as I remembered it. Beige walls, dark wooden desks, certificates in shiny frames, the same potted plant somehow still struggling along. She listened while I talked. Really listened. No interruptions, no pitying looks, just her pen moving quietly across her legal pad. When I finished, she sat back, exhaling slowly. "Margaret," she said, choosing her words with care, "you are not the first client to come to me with concerns like this." I stared at her. "I'm not. People live longer now. They have more assets than previous generations. And sometimes," she sighed, "sometimes the people around them see that as an opportunity instead of a blessing." I felt something sharp twist inside me. "It's my son," I whispered. "My daughter-in-law. I don't want to believe they'd hurt me." She nodded. "Belief and protection are 2 different things. Let's start with what we can verify." She pulled up her own records. "My will, my power of attorney documents, my property deed." She frowned. "Interesting. What?" I asked, my fingers curling into fists in my lap. "I've had 2 calls in the past 6 months asking about your will," she said, "both from a woman claiming to be your authorized contact. She said you were having memory issues." My mouth went dry. "She wanted to know if there was any flexibility in the distribution of your assets," Angela continued. "I refused to discuss anything with her, of course. I insisted you'd have to authorize that yourself in person." She looked at me. "That's why I was surprised not to hear from you after those calls." I shook my head slowly. "I never knew about them." She nodded once firmly. "Then we take that as our starting point." We spent the next hour going over everything. My accounts, my house, my medical directives. I could feel the exhaustion building like a weight on my shoulders, but under it there was something else growing too, a sense of control. By the time I stepped back out into the cold afternoon, my head was spinning with terms and possibilities. But I also knew this. If Jenna and Mark were trying to push me into signing away my home, my rights, my money, it was going to be a lot harder after today. The wind tugged at my scarf as I walked back to my car. I inhaled, the cold air burning my lungs. It wasn't just that I'd been betrayed. It was that I now had a choice. I could pretend I hadn't seen anything. I could swallow the hurt and let them steer my life for me. Or I could quietly, carefully take back the wheel. By the time I turned onto my street again, the sun was low, painting the houses in golden shadow. My little porch light, set on a timer, had just flicked on, glowing warmly against the growing dark. I parked, sat for a moment in the car with the engine off, and stared at that light. "This is still my home," I whispered. "My life, my story." The words settled over me like a promise. Inside, the house smelled faintly of the lavender cleaner I'd used the day before. The living room was dim, the late afternoon light slanting through the blinds. I set my bag down quietly and went straight to the hallway where John's old camera still watched. "Thank you," I said softly, looking up at it. "You old worrywart." That night, after a simple dinner I barely tasted, I sat down and made a new list. This one wasn't of suspicious transactions or deleted appointments. It was the list of what they didn't know. They didn't know the camera was on. They didn't know I'd gone to my lawyer. They didn't know I'd seen the truth. And they definitely didn't know I was done being the gullible old woman they thought I was. I slid my suitcase out from under the bed. Not to run away. Not yet. But to be ready. Ready to leave the house for a day or 2 if I needed to. Ready to stay with an old friend if things escalated. Ready to move if it came to that. As I folded clothes and stacked them neatly inside, my heart pounded with a mix of fear and adrenaline. At the very bottom of the suitcase, I tucked in a small fireproof envelope with my most important documents, copies of my updated will, my bank info, my ID. Angela had helped me gather them. If they wanted to play games with my life. I would not be the one left without a move. I zipped up the suitcase and set it by the closet door. Then I stood in the quiet of my bedroom, the lamplight casting long shadows on the walls, and I whispered to myself, "Two can play this game." And for the first time since I'd watched that footage, a thin, determined smile spread across my face. From that point on, I started living a double life. On the surface, I was the same old Margaret. I still baked banana bread on Sundays. I still watered the drooping houseplants and fussed over the grandkids when they came by. I still let my daughter-in-law move through my house, light on her feet, sweet in her words. But underneath, I was watching. The camera in the hallway wasn't the only one anymore. With Angela's help and a little assistance from a patient young man at an electronics store, I added two more. One in the kitchen, disguised as a digital photo frame. Another in the living room, tucked behind a plant with a wide enough angle to capture most of the room. I told no one. The first time Jenna came over after that, the house smelled like cinnamon and sugar. I had a pie in the oven, the timer ticking softly. She walked in with the kids, all noise and energy. Her lipstick was perfect, her hair pulled back in a high ponytail. My son followed, juggling backpacks and a bag of groceries. "Hi, Mom," he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. He smelled like coffee and winter air. "How are you feeling?" "I'm fine," I said, my hands warm from the oven mitts. "You all look frozen. Take your coats off, come sit." While the kids scrambled into the living room, Jenna drifted into the kitchen. Her eyes flicked briefly over the counters. "Smells amazing," she said. "You know, I keep telling Mark you're spoiling us." I smiled. "That's what moms do." She laughed, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. As I moved around the kitchen, checking the pie, stirring the pot on the stove, I noticed her hands drifting, absent-minded it would seem, to the spot where I usually kept my mail. "Nothing there today. Looking for something?" I asked lightly, keeping my back half-turned. "Oh." Her hand froze, then dropped. "Just habit, you know, making sure nothing important got buried." "Nothing today," I said, turning to look at her. "I already took care of my bills this morning." For a split second, I saw something flicker across her face, a tiny crack in that smooth, sweet expression. Surprise, irritation, maybe even worry. Then it was gone. "Wow, look at you," she said. "So productive. You know you can always call me if you need help." "I know," I replied, "but I think I'll be handling my own paperwork from now on." My tone was casual, light, but her eyes narrowed just a fraction. "Of course," she said. "Whatever makes you comfortable." Later, while the kids played on the living room carpet and Mark flickered channels on the TV, Jenna and I sat at the dining table with cups of tea. The kitchen camera watched silently from the corner, its little digital frame showing a slideshow of family photos to anyone who glanced at it. "So," Jenna said, stirring her tea, "have you given any more thought to what we talked about? You know, maybe downsizing?" I took a sip of my tea. It was chamomile, faintly sweet steam curling up between us. "Oh, that," I said. "You mean selling the house?" She smiled. "Well, not just selling. Moving somewhere more manageable. Somewhere closer to us, or even with us. You know we take good care of you." I looked around my kitchen, really looked. The faded wallpaper John and I had put up together. The chips in the countertop where Mark had dropped a plate when he was 12. The window with a view of the old oak tree. "I've lived here a long time," I said softly. She reached out, touching my hand. "Exactly. And it's a lot. It's dangerous for you to be alone here. Those stairs, the yard, all that maintenance. We worry about you." I gave her a slow smile. "Do you?" Her hand stilled. "Of course we do." The living room camera captured the way her eyes flicked toward my purse on the sideboard. I set my cup down, the ceramic clicking softly on the saucer. "I've been thinking about it," I said. "The house. My future." Her posture straightened ever so slightly. "You have." "I spoke to Angela," I added, watching her face carefully. "Angela." Her voice rose just a bit. "Your lawyer?" "Yes," I said. "We had a good long talk." Color drained from Jenna's face for a heartbeat before she forced another smile. "Oh," she said. "That's smart. It's always good to update things." "Yes," I replied. "It is." I didn't say more. I didn't need to. The silence stretched between us, filled with all the things she was too afraid to ask and all the things I wasn't ready to reveal. She looked at my purse again. That was her mistake, because the kitchen camera saw it, just like it saw the way, later that evening, while I was upstairs looking for an old photo album, she drifted back into the kitchen and sidled up to that same purse. She opened it, quick, efficient. Her fingers closed around my old wallet, rifled through the slots, paused on a card labeled savings. She snapped a covert picture with her phone, then slipped everything back in place. The digital photo frame on the counter clicked softly as it changed to a picture of John holding Mark on his shoulders, both of them squinting into the sun. Jenna didn't realize the frame was watching her too. The next day, I sat with Angela again, this time with a different kind of energy buzzing under my skin. "We need to set a trap," I said quietly. "A legal one." She smiled for the first time since we'd started this whole process. "Now you're thinking like a woman who knows her worth," she said. "All right, here's what we'll do." Together, we drafted a new document, a fake one. It looked official. It had legal language and letterhead, but it wasn't real. It wouldn't change a single thing in my actual will. What it did say in bold print near the bottom was that I intended to transfer the bulk of my estate, this house, my savings, to a charitable foundation that supported widows and seniors in need. Angela slid it across her desk to me. I'm going to give you 2 copies, she said. One for your files here, and one for you to accidentally leave somewhere in your home. I picked up the paper. The weight of it felt heavier than it should have. You're sure about this? She asked. I'm sure, I replied. If they're really trying to take advantage of me, this will flush them out. On the drive home, the sky was a deep cold blue. The bare branches of the trees scratched at the air. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I wasn't used to thinking like this. Strategizing, setting traps. It felt wrong and right at the same time. But I kept seeing Jenna's hand in my purse, kept hearing her voice on that recording, kept thinking about my son's tired face as he agreed to try again. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd made peace with it. Inside, the house welcomed me with its familiar warmth. I hung my coat on the old hook by the door, the wood worn smooth from decades of use. Then I walked straight to the sideboard in the dining room and carefully placed the fake document in the top drawer. I left the drawer open just an inch, just enough. That weekend, when Mark and Jenna came by again, the house smelled like pot roast and fresh bread. The kids ran through the rooms, their laughter bouncing off the walls. I sat with my grandson on the floor, helping him build a tower out of wooden blocks. At some point, Jenna slipped away from the chaos in the living room. I heard the faint creak of the dining room floorboard, the one that always announces your presence whether you like it or not. I kept my eyes on the blocks. From the plant stand in the corner, the camera saw everything. She walked to the sideboard, fingers trailing lightly along the surface. She saw the slightly open drawer. She paused. Of course she looked. She pulled it open and saw the document with Angela's letterhead, my name in bold at the top. Her eyes raced across the text. I watched later as her face shifted from curiosity to confusion to outright panic. Are you okay, Mom? Mark called from the living room. Fine, she replied, voice a little too high. Just checking something. The camera watched as she took out her phone and snapped pictures of each page. Her hand shook, just slightly. That night, after they left, I sat at my little desk again and rewound the footage, watching every second. By the time Jenna's face filled the frame, my heart was thudding with a strange mix of dread and satisfaction. They took the bait, I whispered. The next day my phone rang. It was my son. Hey Mom, he said, trying to sound casual. Can we come over tonight? There's something we need to talk about. I looked out the window. Snow had started to fall, soft and steady, coating the world in white. Of course, I said. I'll put the kettle on. When I hung up, I called Angela. They're coming, I told her. Tonight. I'll be there, she replied. Make sure you don't agree to anything or sign anything until I arrive. Let them talk. Let them show you who they've decided to be. The house felt like it was holding its breath as the day wore on. I moved through my routine, sweeping the kitchen, folding laundry, straightening the living room, but everything felt sharper, more fragile, like glass. At 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. The porch light cast a glow on their faces as I opened the door. Snowflakes clung to their coats, their hair, their lashes. The kids were at Jenna's mother's house, they'd said on the phone. Just the 2 of them tonight. Hi, Mom, Mark murmured, stepping inside. His smile was tired. Jenna followed, a little behind, clutching her purse like a shield. Come in, I said, my voice calm. Let's sit down. We settled in the living room. The lamp cast a warm, soft light. The camera watched quietly from behind the plant. For a moment, no one spoke. The faint hum of the heater filled the space. Finally, Jenna cleared her throat. Margaret, she began, we saw something in your drawer. I tilted my head slightly. Oh, the document from your lawyer, she said, about the charity. I let a small pause stretch between us. Ah, I said, that. She rushed on. We were surprised. I mean, of course it's your decision. You can do whatever you want. But honestly, it hurt that you'd give everything away to strangers instead of your own family. Mark shifted in his seat, eyes flicking between us. Mom, he said, you know we'd never let anything happen to you. We thought we were on the same page about, the future. I looked at my son, really looked, at the worry etched into the lines on his forehead, at the way his fingers twisted together, at the guilt swimming just under the surface. Were we? I asked softly. He swallowed. What do you mean? I said, keeping my tone even. When you and your wife called my lawyer behind my back, when you tried to cancel my doctor's appointments, when you took money from my accounts without telling me, was that the page we were all supposed to be on? The color drained from his face. What? He whispered. Mom, we never. We just. Jenna cut in, her her voice sharp. She's twisting things, Mark. You know how she gets. She's confused. That's why we were trying to help. I stood up. I walked slowly to the TV, my slippers whispering against the hardwood floor. I picked up the remote and turned on the screen. The hallway appeared, frozen. I could feel both of them watching me. I'm old, I said quietly. Not stupid. I pressed play. The footage rolled. Jenna slipping my mail into her purse, whispering on the phone, saying I'd be out of the house soon. Jenna shot to her feet. You invaded my privacy, she snapped. You can't just. I raised a hand. On the screen, my son appeared, standing beside her in the hallway, arguing about asking me to sign that mystery document. Mom, Mark said weakly, this isn't what it looks like. I paused the video on his guilty face. What does it look like to you? I asked, because to me, it looks like my only child and his wife were planning how to get me out of my home and into a situation that would be very convenient for them. He glanced at Jenna, then back at me. We just wanted to make sure you were taken care of. We're so far away. You fall asleep in your chair sometimes, Mom. You forget your meds. Jenna was just taking my money. I cut in, speaking to my lawyer without my consent, lying to me about canceled appointments. His shoulders slumped. I didn't know she called your lawyer, he whispered. Jenna shot him a look that could have cut glass. Mark, be quiet, Jenna, I said, and there was something in my voice that stunned even me. The room fell silent. I turned off the TV. The screen went black, reflecting three shadowy figures in a room that no longer felt like home for all of us. I loved you, I said to both of them. I still do, but love doesn't mean handing over my life because it's practical for you. Love is not sneaking around behind someone's back. Love is not treating them like a problem to be solved or a wallet to be emptied. Mom, Mark choked, we were in debt. You know that. The kids, the house, the bills. We thought if you moved in with us, we could sell this place, pay off. And what if I didn't want to? I asked. Did that matter? He opened his mouth, closed it. I'm not angry at you for struggling, I said, my voice softening just a fraction. Life is hard. Money is tight. I know that. But you don't fix your problems by creating new ones for the people who raised you. They stared at me, one ashamed, one furious. Before any of us could speak again, the doorbell rang. 3 short chimes. I saw Jenna flinch. That will be Angela, I said, smoothing my sweater. My lawyer. Jenna whirled around. You called your lawyer? She hissed. What are you doing, Margaret? What I should have done the moment you asked for my passwords, I replied. I opened the door. Cold air swept in, along with Angela's calm, steady presence. She stepped inside, shaking snow from her coat, and gave me a small nod. Evening, she said to the room, setting a folder down on the coffee table. I think we have some things to clear up. We sat. She opened the folder. She started with facts, the record of unauthorized inquiries into my will, the calls Jenna made, the documented attempts to cancel my appointments, the suspicious banking activity. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She simply laid everything out like cards on a table. With every page she turned, I watched my son's face crumble a little more. I watched Jenna's mask slip, anger, denial, calculation, and finally fear. This isn't a criminal case yet, Angela said eventually, but it could easily become one if this continues. Criminal, Mark whispered, horrified. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult is a crime, she said, and I have more than enough evidence to raise the alarm if needed. Silence pressed in around us, thick and heavy. What do you want from us? Jenna snapped finally, cheeks flushed. Some grand confession? Fine. We made mistakes. We panicked. We were scared about money, and we thought. You thought I wouldn't notice if you slowly dismantled my life piece by piece, I said. She glared at me, eyes bright with tears she refused to let fall. You have no idea what it's like to be drowning in bills, she said. You sit here in your paid-off house with your savings and your old stories, and we're out there trying to survive. And so your solution, I said, was to strip me of everything I built, everything I worked for without my consent? She opened her mouth, shut it again. Angela closed the folder with a soft thump. Here's what's going to happen, she said. Margaret has already updated her will. Her home, her savings, and her medical decisions are fully protected. You will no longer have access to any of her accounts, passwords, or paperwork. Any attempt to interfere with her affairs from this point forward will be documented and reported. Jenna let out a harsh laugh. So that's it. We're cut off. No, I said quietly. You're being given a chance. They both looked at me. I could press charges, I said. We have enough evidence. I could make sure the law reads every word you've said about me, every decision you tried to make over my head. I'm not doing that. Not yet. Why? Jenna whispered, bitter. So you can feel noble? No, I replied, because I still believe people can make better choices when they know they're being watched, and because I want my son to have the chance to be a better man than this moment. Tears spilled over from Mark's eyes finally. Mom, he choked. I'm so sorry. I looked at my boy, the man, the father, the person sitting on my couch torn between the woman he married and the woman who raised him. I know, I said, but sorry doesn't give me back the trust you broke. That's something we're going to have have to rebuild. Slowly, carefully, Angela stood up. "I'll leave you three to talk," she said, "but I'll be in touch, Margaret. And remember, if anything feels off, anything at all, you call me." Immediately after she left, the house felt different. Still warm, still familiar, but charged with something raw and new. We sat there for a long time. No yelling, no more accusations, just the quiet ache of people realizing the shape of what they'd almost done. When they finally left that night, the snow had stopped. The street lights glowed softly on the blanketed street. I watched them walk to their car from the window, their footsteps leaving a clear trail across the untouched snow. I didn't know when I'd see them next, but I knew it would be on my terms, not theirs. In the weeks that followed, the house felt calmer. It was strange. The cameras were still there, watching like silent sentries. The documents were still in their safe place. The storm had passed, but the sky wasn't entirely clear. Mark called more often. At first, his voice trembled when he spoke. He apologized again and again, sometimes for the same thing, sometimes for new details that came back to him in flashes of shame. I listened. I didn't rush him, but I didn't rush myself to forgive either. Jenna stayed away for a while. When she finally did come by, she was quieter, more careful, not sweet, not sharp, just subdued. She didn't go near my mail. She didn't ask about my accounts. She didn't mention the house. One afternoon, while the kids played in the yard and Mark was inside fixing a loose kitchen drawer, she and I found ourselves alone on the porch. The air smelled like wet earth and pine. The sun was sinking, turning the sky pink at the edges. "I was wrong," she said suddenly, staring at her hands. "I need you to know that I know that." I watched a squirrel dart along the fence. "I know," I said. "I grew up without much," she went on. "We were always one bill away from losing everything. When I married Mark and saw how steady things were with you and John in this house, it felt safe. Too safe. Maybe I started to think your safety was ours by default." She laughed humorlessly. "Doesn't make what I did right. I just want you to know I wasn't planning to throw you on the street. I never thought you'd be that cruel," I said. "But sometimes taking control of someone's life slowly can feel just as cruel." She nodded, eyes shining. "I know." We sat in silence for a while. The porch light flicked on above us, humming softly. "I don't know if you'll ever trust me again," she said finally. "I don't know if I deserve that, but if you let me, I'd like to try to earn some of it back. For Mark's sake, for the kids, for your own sake," I added gently. She looked at me surprised. "You need to be someone you can live with at the end of the day," I said. "Trust me, when you get to my age, that matters far more than how much money's in the bank." She laughed weakly, wiped her eyes. We didn't hug. Not then. Maybe not for a long time, but it was a start. Over time, the rhythm of my life shifted into something new. Not exactly like before. Not as naive, but not poisoned either. I rediscovered small joys. Morning coffee on the porch, watching the sunlight creep across the lawn, the sound of the kettle whistling, and knowing that I was the one deciding what to do with my day. The soft glow of the camera indicator lights, a reminder not of paranoia, but of wisdom learned the hard way. I still trusted people. I just trusted myself more. A full year later, on a quiet evening close to Christmas, I was scrolling through my camera app, not because I distrusted anyone in particular that day, but out of habit, when I saw something strange on the hallway feed. A figure. Not Jenna. Not Mark. My heart jerked for a moment. Then I zoomed in. It was my neighbor Tom, dropping off a small gift basket and waving at the camera like it was an old friend. I laughed out loud, alone in my living room. Later, as I turned off lights and prepared for bed, I passed the little glowing dots of the cameras and felt grateful. Not that I had caught my daughter-in-law, but that I had caught myself in time. In time to stop something terrible. In time to stand up for myself. In time to remember that getting older doesn't mean disappearing. It just means you've seen enough to know what's worth fighting for. Here's what I learned through all of this. Love is not blind. It shouldn't be. Love sees clearly and chooses anyway. But if people ask you to close your eyes to what's right in front of you, that isn't love. That's control. I learned that protecting yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes you responsible for your own dignity, your own story, your own ending. And I learned that sometimes the sweetest smile can hide the sharpest teeth. But you don't have to become bitter because of it. You just have to become wiser. If you're listening to this and some part of you feels that same tightness in your chest I felt, that quiet voice that says, something isn't right, I hope you trust it. Ask questions. Check the statements. Reread the paperwork. Turn on the metaphorical camera in your own life. You are not a burden for wanting clarity. You are not ungrateful for wanting respect. You are allowed to protect yourself, even from the people you love, especially from the people you love, if they stop loving you in a way that keeps you safe. Thank you for staying with me through my story. If it touched you, or if it reminded you of someone you know, I'd be grateful if you'd let me know. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love seeing how far these little pieces of my life can travel. Don't forget to like the video if it helped you feel seen, and subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories like this. Stories about love, betrayal, and and the quiet kind of courage it takes to stand up for yourself. Until next time, remember, when something feels off, you're not being dramatic, you're being warned.